Hello everyone, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name's Caitlin and I run Poetry and Prose Adventures, and today I want to talk about Hemingway's The Sun Also Rises. Now I just finished this whole compilation. It's a Canterbury Classics. It was published in 2022. However, I just want to talk about The Sun Also Rises because the other stories, there were other short stories in here and some poems, but they just didn't really do all that much for me. So I just wanted to talk about The Sun Also Rises. So I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. I really did enjoy this book. I thought it was relatable at times. I thought it was funny at times. I thought it was kind of heartbreaking at times. But most of all, I just found it to be very interesting. And I wanted to start with some historical background on the book because I think that it's important to understand historical context when you're reading older works of fiction and nonfiction. So it was published in 1926, and this is a post-World War I. It's important to note that Hemingway was in the war, and he considered himself an expatriate, kind of like Fitzgerald's and other people that were in his friend circle at the time. And this book is also semi-autobiographical. It's based around what him and his friends did when they were hanging out in Europe after World War I, and it also summarizes the spirit and feelings of the lost generation, which can also be considered the post-World War I generation. So I think all of that's important for context because there are parts of the book that some people might not like or find offensive, and we have to understand that this was written at a much earlier time. This book is almost 100 years old, actually. Let's be real. So just wanted to clarify, wanted to clear that up a little bit because I have favorite quotes in this book that I am going to share, and I think the historical context is important to understand, and now I'm being redundant. Anyways, so we've got 5 main characters. Our narrator is Jacob Barnes, and he's the main character, and he's not really, I wouldn't say he's like the protagonist or the antagonist. I think he's kind of somewhere in between. And then Robert Cohn is his friend, and then we have Brett, who is this woman that hangs out with them, and completely, in my opinion, she's insufferable. I can't stand her. I think she makes really poor decisions, and she's lost, you know. I didn't like her character, and I don't know if you're supposed to like her. I don't think so. And then we have Bill Gorton, who is one of Jacob's friends as well. And then we have Mike, who shows up later in the novel with Brett after she goes to San Sebastian. So our setting, it starts in Paris. They're hanging out in cafes. Robert and Jake are talking about life and where it's going and what they want to do and how they view things. Then they all end up meeting up in Spain for the Fiesta de San Fermin, which is the festival of the bulls, the running bulls and the bullfights in Pamplona, Spain. There's lots of cafes involved, there's lots of bars involved, lots of clubs involved, nightclubs, I need to add. Then there's bullfights, and there's even scenes in hotel rooms. So going into the plot, the book starts out, and Robert's really questioning his life, and he tells Jake, I can't stand it to think my life is going so fast and I'm not really living it. And I think anybody in their mid to late 20s and early 30s probably feels that way. I found it to be relatable. And then Jacob responds with, nobody ever lives their life all the way up except bullfighters. So that kind of gives you a cue as to what's going to happen later on in the book. And of course, Jacob and Bill come up with the idea to go to Pamplona, Spain to go see the festival, and Brett, Robert, and Mike end up meeting up with them. At some point, Robert is kind of like gone for a bit, and Jacob hasn't heard from him, and then he gets back in touch with Brett after she goes to San Sebastian. Spoiler alert, later on he finds out that Robert and Brett spent all this time in San Sebastian, and Robert's supposed to be his best friend, so Jacob ends up being mad at him. Everybody ends up being mad at Robert at the end of the book, and I think that's ridiculous because they all just end up turning on him for seemingly no reason. Like, Brett turns on him, which is crazy work. I ended up feeling very sorry for Robert at the end of the book. I wrote this note. Brett essentially has a new boyfriend in each city. Hence, Mike. Mike shows up. She's like, this is my new man. We could get married. And everyone's like, didn't you just date someone else like 3 weeks ago? So anyways, the group is drinking, they're partying in Pamplona, they're having the time of their life. Brett ends up finding a bullfighter who's 10 years younger than her. Not, maybe even a little bit more. I should note that Jake's in love with her. Jake wants to marry Brett. He wants to be with her, and he doesn't get it. He's like, why are there all these other guys that she's interested in and she doesn't want me? But then she continuously tosses him aside, and he still shows up for her. Some conflicts. You kind of find out, like, everybody shows their true colors towards the end of the book, at the height of the bullfight as well, like at the height of the fiesta. Everybody's showing their true colors. They're all arguing. They're all completely drunk. They've been drunk for like 4 days straight. And they all end up attacking each other and attacking Robert. And Robert's kind of just like, screw you guys. I don't need this anymore. Like, you guys aren't really my friends, which they're not. They're not really friends of anyone. They're kind of just there for their own selfish needs and own selfish tendencies. Like, Brett has a new boyfriend all the time. Jacob continuously shows up for her because he thinks that she'll fall in love with him. Robert really starts off with, I just want to go live my life, and life's moving so fast and I don't know what to do about it, so let's go travel the world and go see what we can do. And then Mike's there because he's also in love with Brett. And then Bill, honestly, I think Bill might have been the most unselfish person in the entire story, because Bill's just there to party, get drunk, he's honestly just doing his own thing, and he's not really there to hurt anybody else or to put revenge on anybody else. Like, Jacob finds out that Robert and Brett, hook up, and he's pissed about it, so he tries to, like, do stuff to hurt Robert and to make him upset, when meanwhile Robert doesn't really care. Robert was cheating on his wife. And I don't know, it's just crazy. It's just people making these immoral decisions and hurting each other, and they all continue to call each other friends. And I don't know. I've had friend groups like that. So I think that's why I found it so relatable, because there's so much conflict and tension within the friend group, and it's like there's so many different types of tension. Like, there's a sexual tension between Brett and literally everybody else because they're all in love with her, and then there's friendship tension because Jacob's mad at Robert, and then I think Bill ends up being mad at Robert, and then Mike can't stand Robert. Mike calls Robert so many names throughout the story, and he, like, tries to talk to Jake, and he's like, I hate Robert, and Jake's like, yeah, I do too, because he got Brett and I didn't. And it's like, it's very interesting. And I think, like, a good metaphor analogy would be to say, like, they're all cutting off their noses to spite their face. Like, they truthfully are just in there for their own selfish, narcissistic intent, and they don't care about anybody else's feelings. And they're like, well, what about me? What about me? What about me? And I find it so interesting and relatable, because being in your 20s, you're, like, making new friends, you're getting rid of old friends, or you have old friends and you guys are still hanging on. And people are so selfish, and I love the way that Hemingway wrote that. I really love the way that he portrays his friends and himself, honestly. And then we get to the ending. The first sentence of book 3 starts out with, in the morning it was all over. So the night before, they were all fighting, they were all mad at each other, they're all, like, getting back at each other and starting a bunch of drama. Everybody goes after Robert for whatever reason I still don't really understand. And then I do think that this kind of symbolizes, like, this is a start to the end of the book. Things are about to change. Jacob ends up going back to Paris. They kind of all split after this, except for Jake and Brett, because she gets back and he's right there waiting for her. Might as well have a sign saying, I'm in love with you, I'll do anything for you. Like, he follows her around like a puppy dog, and she doesn't care. Like, she literally does not care about him whatsoever. She just wants him when it's convenient for her. She wants him around when no other man is going to give her attention, and she needs a friend, but she doesn't treat anybody else like a friend. So I couldn't stand her. And the final scene, like, the last 2 quotes are, oh, Jake, we could have had such a damn good time together. And he says, yes, isn't it pretty to think so? And I felt, honestly, I kind of felt bad for him because I was like, this man is like on his hands and knees for her. She doesn't even notice him until she needs a friend. And the whole time, like the whole 230 pages of the book, he's just like, we should be together. We should be together. We should be together. I don't understand why she doesn't want me. I don't understand why she doesn't want to be with me. And she just doesn't care. She's like, whatever. Let me go find this other boy. Oh, I like that bullfighter over there. Oh. And screw Robert. And it's like, girl. So my personal opinions. I really did like this book. I'm very passionate about disliking Brett. And you've got to read the rest of the story to understand the full thing. I don't want to put any spoilers or too many spoilers in here for you guys. I do think that it's a great Hemingway book. And I love Hemingway. I have loved Hemingway since high school. I find it relatable if you're in your early to mid 20s, early to late 20s, and, you know, maybe your early 30s, you'd probably find this book enjoyable. Remember, there's historical context that needs to be understood when you're reading a book like this, because there are words and comments that you might not like, but you can't really read it with 2025 vision. So, anyways, I think it's a great book. It's 5 out of 5 stars for me. And I love Hemingway. So definitely give it a look and check it out if you like Hemingway, if you want to read some more classic literature. I think it's a good introduction into Hemingway's writing as well. And if you do like it, or you do like Hemingway, and you like The Great Gatsby or whatever, and you haven't read The Great Gatsby, read The Great Gatsby. Then I would read The Old Man and the Sea. That's one of my other really favorite Hemingway novellas. It's a shorter one. So, I'm going to get into some of my favorite quotes. And they're kind of out of context. I could kind of explain around them. My first one that I highlighted was, I mistrust all frank and simple people, especially when their stories hold together. I don't really know why I highlighted that one, but it's interesting. I kind of like that, you know? And then we have, I can't stand it to think my life is going so fast and I'm not really living it. And then Jake's response, nobody ever lives their life all the way up except bullfighters. And then back to Robert, don't you ever get the feeling that all your life is going by and you're not taking advantage of it? Do you realize you live nearly half the time you have to live already? And I think it really resonated with me because in the last 10 years, I feel like I've just blanked, and it's like there's like bits and pieces of my life that I remember very vividly and pieces that I don't remember at all. And it's like, wow, I'm 26 now, and my life is like, life's moving so fast. You know, it's like Ferris Bueller said, you gotta stop and look around. You gotta take a moment and look around, because before you know it, it's gonna be gone. So Robert's just talking about, he's just like panicking, you know what I mean? And then Jake tells him, you can't get away from yourself by moving from one place to another. And I really liked that. I liked this quote too, because anyways, so Jake and Brett are talking, and he says, it's funny. It's very funny, and it's a lot of fun, too, to be in love. She says, do you think so? He says, I don't mean fun that way. In a way, it's an enjoyable feeling. And she said, no, I think it's hell on earth. And then he goes, it's good to see each other. And she says, no, I don't think it is. He says, don't you want to? She says, I have to. And there was stuff that she had said that I was like, yeah, I get it. Like, she flits from one guy to another because she doesn't want to fall in love, you know? So she's hiding from that aspect of her life in other guys. At the end, this is still in the beginning of the book. At the end of chapter 4, he says, it's awfully easy to be hard-boiled about everything in the daytime, but at night it is another thing. And I had to look up hard-boiled because I was like, what on earth does that mean? It basically just means being tough and cynical. So it's easier to be cynical in the daytime, but at night your brain is wandering, your mind is wandering, and you can't sleep. You're thinking about things that you probably wish you weren't thinking about, and it's harder to be cynical when you're essentially daydreaming about stuff, you know? Because you're being hopeful and you want things to turn out good, and you don't want to be jaded, but it's easier to be that way when you're around friends than it is alone with your thoughts. So then later on, we get to Bill and Jake talking in a cafe. Bill is trying to get Jake to be like, you're right. Well, not trying to, but Bill's trying to encourage Jake to write more. Because Jake is literally, he's sitting at cafes getting drunk with his friends at 10 in the morning. Or he's probably sleeping way later than that, and then they go out at night. And essentially none of them really do anything. Like, they don't really have jobs except Bill. Bill's like an avid writer, and he takes his vacations when he's got the time. But like, he's telling Jake, he's like, don't you work? Like, what are you doing? They're talking about Robert in this cafe. Because Bill was like, you don't understand irony, you have no pity, say something pitiful. And Jake goes, Robert Cohn. And Bill goes, not so bad, that's better, now why is he pitiful? And then Jake fights him on it, and he says it's too early in the morning, and Bill goes, there you go, and you claim you want to be a writer too. You're only a newspaper man, an expatriated newspaper man. You ought to be ironical the minute you get out of bed. You ought to wake up with your mouth full of pity. They continue talking or whatever, and then Bill also tells him, you're an expatriate, you've lost touch with the soil, you get precious. Fake European standards have ruined you. You drink yourself to death, you become obsessed by sex, you spend all your time not talking, not working. You are an expatriate. See, you hang around cafes. And I think Bill might have been one of the more favorable characters in the book, if I'm being honest, because he's honest, and he tells his friends what he thinks. And he's like, you say you want to do this, but you're sitting here doing nothing, worried about some girl that doesn't even care about you, and you're not writing, you're not making any notes on what you're doing, because he could be, and then eventually, you get the semi-autobiographical book about what they did. But it's interesting, because I think everybody needs friends that are honest, friends and family members that are completely honest with them, brutality included, about what they're doing and what they're not doing with their life. Like, you say you want to do something, but you're not actually doing it. You have problems committing yourself to the life you want to live. My dad and I have conversations like that regularly. And I think it's important, And instead of thanking Bill and saying, I appreciate your advice. I appreciate you being honest with me. I appreciate you being able to try to motivate me and encourage me to do what I said I wanted to do. Instead, Jake gets sour about it, and he's like, no, Robert sucks because him and it. And it's like, no. Bill's there to be your friend. And that's what a friend does, The rest of them, forget it. Forget it. None of them are, and that's another thing. None of them are honest with themselves or each other about what they're doing. Nobody calls Brett out on sleeping around. Nobody calls Jake out for being a sourpuss about everything. Nobody calls Robert out for, I don't really know if Robert did anything wrong. And nobody calls Mike out for being a complete jerk all the time. Like, Bill's the only one that's like, this is the honest truth about who you are and how you're acting, and it sucks right now. Instead, everyone's like, poor me, and Bill's like, no, you're an expatriate. Poor you. Do what an expatriate does. Stand on business. Because Bill stands on business. And I love him for that. Like, instead, they're all just worried about stuff that doesn't matter. But we're all humans, so don't we all? That's the relatable part of the book. So anyways, I don't know if I've got any other favorite parts in here. I do have a favorite scene, and that's the end where they're all going at each other's necks. I think that's just about it, This will be the last one, and this is Jake. He realizes his friends aren't really, they're all kind of crappy people. He goes back to France, because other, people wanted to stay in Spain. Or no, I'm sorry. Bill went to Paris, and he said he had invited him, and Jake states that he was through with fiestas for a while. He didn't want to go party in Paris. He wanted to go home. And he says, everything is on such a clear financial basis in France. It is the simplest country to live in. No one makes things complicated by becoming your friend for any obscure reason. If you want people to like you, you only have to spend a little money. And that probably gives you some perspective on him. And then at the end, him and Brett catch up again. And he finds out that Mike wanted to marry her. She clearly states, He really wanted to marry me, so I couldn't go away from him, he said. He wanted to make sure I would never go away from him. And then you find out her age, and I'm not even going to tell you. And then she says she's going back to him. And he's so damn nice, and he's so awful. He's my sort of thing. So Brett just ends up being a walking contradiction all the time. Because she says one thing, does another. She does a bunch of stuff, says she's over it, and then she goes right back to whatever she's doing. And she's non-committal. She doesn't commit to herself. She doesn't commit to anybody. So, anyways, that's my review on The Sun Also Rises. If you have read it and you liked it and you need more book recommendations, The Great Gatsby is really good if you haven't read that. The Old Man and the Sea is also really good. And I'm trying to think of others, but I can't. So anything along those lines, you know. And I hope you guys enjoyed this. Don't forget to give me a like and a subscribe. That'd really help me out if you want to continue listening to my book reviews and watching all my other book content come out. See you guys in the next one.